Okay, so we're a couple of minutes past the hour, so I'll get started. So this week I'm really pleased to welcome Lauren Corlies, who is the Education and Public Outreach Director for Rubin Observatory and has been since 2019. Before this, she was the Astronomy Outreach Specialist there and has been doing things like that. But before she started doing EPO, she received her PhD from Columbia University, and followed by a postdoc at Johns Hopkins, where her astronomy was focused on analysing cosmological simulations. But today she's going to be talking to us about what they've been doing at Rubin for the EPO side of things. So take it away, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you everyone for coming to this talk today. So I wanted to start by giving sort of an outline of this talk and what my goals are for it. So in general, I'm going to start by introducing what are the goals and audiences of Rubin Education and Public Outreach. If you've never heard anything about what we're doing or what our goals are, I'll go over them. And then for each of those audiences, I want to in turn reflect on and explore who they are and what they want from an astronomy experience. So these two things are always coming into play as we design our program of what do we want to achieve and what do the people that we're building for want to achieve. And then for each audience, I'm going to discuss and demonstrate what EPO is building in response to the meeting of those two things. So my goal for the talk are hopefully to get you excited about the things that we're building at Rubin EPO. I think that they're pretty great and hopefully you will too. But also to give you an understanding of why and how centering our audiences has shaped our program. So I wanted this talk to be more than just like, here is what we're doing, but to go a little bit deeper into thinking about who are we building for and why did we make some of the choices that we did. And hopefully that's something that you can take away and think about and maybe incorporate into whatever programs or materials that you'll be crafting in the future as well. So to start, this is our mission statement as Rubin EPO, and I think it does a really good job of summarizing what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're doing it for. So Rubin Observatory EPO's mission is to offer accessible and engaging online experiences that provide non-specialists access to and context for LSST data so anyone can explore the universe and be part of the discovery process. And so I feel like this is an especially important time to stop and think of most of the effort of the observatory is rightly going into building the observatory itself and thinking about how can scientists get access to the data and use it to do research. But we're a full subsystem within the observatory that's specifically thinking about the non-specialist. We also want them to have that sort of great experience of finding something new or learning something you didn't know before, and we're building tools to help them do that. And so working from that mission statement and pulling out a few of these words, you can really get a sense of what our goals are for EPO and what our approach is to designing and building our program. So in particular, we want the program to be accessible. So as I mentioned, we're designing specifically for the general public. We're not simply taking tools that are being built for researchers and then offering them to the public. In general, that's not a super successful strategy, as I'll talk about later. We'd like our program to be interesting, which seems obvious, and of course we want people to find it interesting. But what I mean by that is that we're trying to provide narratives so that the data itself has context and meaning relevant to general experiences. When we think about ourselves as astronomers, we've spent years of our lives building up that context, learning about astronomy so that when we're offered new information, we start thinking of questions we want to ask or drawing connections between those past experiences. And we want to help the general public have that same sort of experience as well, except with different kinds of context than all of the astronomy learning that we've done. We'd like the products to be engaging. So we want to encourage discovery of new ideas and interactions to have people really not just passively receiving information, but interacting with different things that we'll provide them and making their own connections across all the different materials that we'll be hosting on our website. And ultimately, we want to be capable of reaching a large audience. So we're creating an online program in a way that anyone with a cell phone should be able to access and use all of the content that we're creating. And this was also a specific choice because so much of the outreach that we do is in person. We, give lectures, we go to classrooms, and all those are really great to be in the room with people and interacting as an astronomer. But if you live in a place where those sorts of activities aren't happening, you can still access and interact with our program. So I keep talking about the people that we're building for. Who are these people? So EPO has identified 4 core audiences that we're building our program for. So they're listed here on the right. So there are formal educators, so teachers in classrooms, the science-interested general public, which is still quite broad, I'll admit, but is a group of people that we're thinking about how can we help and serve. Citizen science principal investigators, and informal science centers, and specifically the people who are creating content for them. And so what's been really great is EPO has been part of the observatory construction project from the very beginning. So while other subsystems in the observatory have had time to think about, how should we build the telescope? How should we build the camera? We've been thinking about how can we build EPO and really thinking about these audiences and having the space to do research into understanding how we can best serve them. And so that research involves questions like, what are these audiences looking for in an astronomy experience? Not just what do we want to give them, but what do they actually want to receive? What would get them excited about our program to make them think like, yes, I want to keep doing this. I want to come back and check in and see what other new things Rubin is creating. What would turn them away from our program? So what would they see or interact with and be like, I don't think this is really for me. We want to try and stay away from those things that would cause people not to want to learn more. And how can we engage with these audiences and not just push out messages to them? So we just don't want to be giving things to people. We want to be interacting with them and getting their feedback and hopefully engaging with them more directly. So I'm going to go through each of these audiences and address some of these questions on the left for each audience, and then demonstrate what we're building that we hope is helping meet people's needs while also achieving our goals. So I'm going to start with the science-interested general public because it is, in fact, the biggest audience that we're looking to serve. So ultimately, what the science-interested general public wants out of any sort of astronomy experience is to be inspired and wowed by the universe, right? They want to look at something and think, that's really cool. I never thought anything like that could exist. I've never seen anything like that before. That sort of inspirational moment. But in general, they need guidance to feel confident participating in the discovery process, besides more of just thinking like, wow, but wanting to learn more. There's this sense of, oh, that's really complicated. Like, I don't know if I can understand that. And so how can we help them feel confident in their interactions that they're having? Which is also linked to this anxiety they can have about their own potential or love of learning. Like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not really a science person. Like, how do you take those two conflicting things of being wowed by the universe, but maybe having anxiety about learning anything more deeply? They're interested in experiences that they can share with their families and friends. Like, hey, look at this cool thing I found. Parents in particular have expressed interest of wanting to be able to do things with their kids. And in general, they're looking to spend a short amount of time with astronomy content. They're busy, they're doing this in their free time. They're not going to invest hours and hours in trying to learn some sort of new software. They want to be able to get all of these impacts really quickly. So one of the primary things that we've been building over the last few years are these ideas of interactive widgets, we're calling them. But really what it is marrying our goal of wanting to have people interact more directly with the data with their interest in terms of really wanting things to feel intuitive and welcoming and natural and not complicated. So I'm going to go through a few of these widgets that we've built, which hopefully will explain or describe what I just did. It'll be a better demonstration than what I can do with words. And you can check out these tools for yourself if you go to this link, which I'll have on the bottom few slides. So Rubin Science is very broad. We're trying to address all forms of Rubin Science, and you'll see that in the diversity of interactions I'm about to demonstrate. So this first one on the left is a solar system visualization that we've built. I don't demonstrate in this little video that I take here, but you can rotate it, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, and what I'm demonstrating is you can change the speed at which things orbit. And so you can get a sense pretty intuitively of how these things are interacting with each other, how they move differently depending on their spaces in the orbit. All just by clicking a few buttons that you can recognize. This one I like a lot. So this one is related to the idea of the expanding universe. And so it's taking a 3D distribution of galaxies and trying to help people connect that to the Hubble diagram. So something that can be kind of hard to move from 3D space to more of a 2D scatter plot. And it's showing them if you look at the relation between these galaxies at the Milky Way, you get one line. And if you switch it so that you're an observer in different galaxies, then you get the same line. And so it's hammering home this idea that the universe is the same everywhere. And then it's neat. This is just, clicking, pulling, zooming, nothing more complicated than that. All of these things just run in your browser. You don't need to download any software. If you can open, hopefully, the most updated version of Google Chrome, then these things all just work. Another one that we've built to sort of get into the sense of how can people make discoveries with the data is letting people decide for themselves what type of supernova is this data. So we've only given them 2 choices, not the full breadth. They're not necessarily going through and fitting a whole curve because that can get kind of intense. But if we give them these 2 templates, allow them to manipulate it as they please, now they can make their own determination about what they think this data is with very minimal effort and just these intuitive interactions. Another one that I like a lot is connecting the images that we take to data that we can receive and then plots. And so you're going from the actual images the telescope is taking to a measurement to a concept. And then this one, because, for example, all the transients that Rubin is going to be able to find, people are asked to identify the supernova, which is visually changing. And then actually every frame in this image is linked to a data point. So if you move between the frames, you can see, okay, it's getting brighter and these points are getting higher on the plot. So again, encouraging these sorts of connections between images and more numerical information. All of these widgets are going to be featured in content that's going to live on our website. So the website is really going to be hosting everything that we're creating. I have a little video that demonstrates not only just what it looks like from the top, but if you scroll through, we've built a gallery that's going to really help people find these images that they're interested in finding in a way that hopefully will be fun to scroll through and to explore. Another big application that we're building is what we're referring to as the sky viewer. So the Rubin Observatory is going to image the southern sky every 3 nights. And every year with the data release, it's going to produce a deep co-added image of the southern sky. And so we want people to be able to see that whole picture, to explore it for themselves. But what we notice is that current all sky visualizers are typically tools for astronomers presented to the public. So they're sort of completely open-ended. People don't really know how to approach them. I myself am a theorist, and I've gone to try and use some of these tools, and I don't know what this is asking of me. I don't know the RAN deck of what I'm looking for. I just want to look for things. And so those sorts of where do I start interactions can be missing from the tools that are currently available. And ultimately, people are mostly just looking to see inspiring, beautiful pictures. They don't want to have to learn a whole interface. And if they are interested in learning more, it's about the context of the object, what it is, why it's important, why it's unique, and less about quantitative properties like its photometry. So we're building the sky viewer to take those considerations of our audience into mind and to directly build an interface that responds to that. So I'm going to show a little video, but to walk through what you're going to see, there's 2 sort of main experiences that you can have in the sky viewer. So one is more of an open exploration. We do still want people to be able to move around and click and explore things for themselves. But now we've also been building out an option of, I don't really know where to start, please send me in a direction. And so we're going to create a whole set of tours of different things in the sky, and then just take people to different objects and give them some stories or information about them. So you have these 2 different paths that you can take depending on how confident you feel using the tool. So the sky viewer is really meant to give this context and narratives for objects in the sky. That's more the focus than letting you click on every single thing that you can see. We'd rather have people have meaningful interactions with the smaller number of objects than get numerical data about all of them. We're also providing filtering tools, and that use data or details that people will recognize. So they can search by object type or by distance or brightness. And we're also offering different fun objectives and objects of interest that you can check out. So once again, trying to take this concern of, I don't know where to start, and give people options. So now I'm going to show the video that goes a little bit quickly through a bunch of these functionalities. But it's going to start with this explore option. So it opens up, we give a little tour, explanation of what the buttons do. You can turn the objects of interest on and off depending on what experience you want. We have certain objects that we're going to mark as particularly interesting if there's already still too many. Again, this filtering option, a filtering by type or by some sort of property that we can define. You can still click on the things of interest and get information about them, see the picture more clearly, get its name, get some data. You can zoom in, obviously. That's one of the core functionalities of this, is being able to pan and zoom and look around the sky, and also to be able to search for objects that you might be interested in. Now it's going to take you into the second flow that I described, this idea of a tour. So we've mocked out one that's just some Messier objects because those have pretty pictures, and why not start with that? So you'll see you'll get some background information, you get some fun facts, more directions about what's going to happen, so you're not just dropped in the deep end. And then the tour starts, and it starts to take you to these objects that we've picked out that are interesting and provide you with more information about them. And you can click through as many as you want or exit the tour when you please. So at the moment, we're at a stage where we have the beginnings of a proof of concept built out. So we can pan and zoom, we've gotten some filtering working, but the full building of this tool is something that's going to be happening in the next year and a half. And finally, our last piece for the science-interested general public is our communications and social media effort. So we're thinking very intentionally about what we want to communicate and how. And so we've chosen to adopt a voice that's friendly, conversational, and enthusiastic. So we want to have people feel more like they're talking to someone that they would maybe have an in-person interaction with, and less of a, I am an organization who is giving you information kind of a feel. There's a balance there of trying to get people really excited while also conveying the information that we want to convey. Another goal is to center the people of the observatory and not just the science and the technology. So the observatory is not doing science, people are doing science, and those people are what the general public can also relate to. We're working hard to define our goals, key messages, and channels to help guide the communications. And we've chosen really actively to center social media as a way to meet people where they are. Everyone's already on social media, and it offers the opportunity to engage with people more directly. So to ask them questions, to get responses, to have people start talking to each other about different things that we'll be posting. And that to recognize that that level of engagement and interaction takes a dedicated amount of effort. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to our second audience, which is formal educators, by which I mean teachers in advanced middle school, high school, and College 101 classrooms. So this program is specifically designed for in-classroom use, not for after-school clubs or things like that. And so when we step back and think about the teachers and what sorts of things they're looking for in their classrooms, first and foremost, they're interested in bringing meaningful experiences to their students. They want to feel like this is adding value to the lessons that they already have prepared. But at the same time, they have to meet curriculum requirements set by the government. They can't just teach whatever they want. They have specific goals that they need to meet throughout the year. They also have limited time to learn new tools, right? Teachers are already massively overworked. If something's going to take hours to learn how to use, they're not likely to have the time, even if they have the interest. Managing software on school computers can be challenging. If you have access to the computers, if there's firewalls, like who used them last. And so trying to mitigate that challenge for them. And to recognize that many may have limited knowledge of astronomy content. So maybe this isn't their primary focus, but they've been asked to teach it for the year and they want to learn more, but don't have that deep background to draw upon. So for our program, what we've done is we've built a series of classroom investigations, but also a whole suite of support materials for teachers. So all the investigations center Rubin data using the intuitive widget interactions that I demonstrated before. We currently have 6 investigations fully built and tested that teach to astronomy curricula, and I've listed the topics here. They all run in the browser, as I mentioned, so no software is required, I should say. Teachers don't need to download anything, they just have to have students open the browser and they can start. And most importantly, I think, is that we've also developed a bunch of these support materials to help teachers meet national standards and feel confident in the classroom. So this whole program is hosted also on our website. And on the far right, there's this column that says quick links here, which start to demonstrate the amount of support materials that we've generated. So it gives them an introduction to the topic. We've identified the learning outcomes that they're teaching to, prerequisite concepts they need to cover before they should use these in the classroom. How long will this investigation take them to use it? Do they need 1 class period, 2, 3? Are there standards? What standards do these activities apply to? The background, there's a section on frequently asked student questions. So if this is a concept that you're not fully familiar with, we've already thought about, these are the things people are probably going to ask you. Here are a bunch of answers to help build confidence in using these materials. And what's fun is we thought about using these in real classroom environments. So this is an example of one of the investigations that we've built. Students are asked to answer a bunch of questions using these histograms, which give them the data that they need, which seamlessly transition between the data. If they try to move on before they answer the questions, they're not allowed. They must go through, we know you tried not to read these. We're going to make you answer these questions because they're important. They build on the rest of the lesson. So the student goes through and answers the question, and we record their answers in a table for them because they'll need to use that information later on. And so these sorts of real classroom environments and scenarios are considered in the design of the investigations. Okay, our third audience is citizen science principal investigators. So what they're looking for is to try and include the public in a research effort, and they want to be able to go from their research question to a citizen science project that's live and actually having people participate as quickly as possible. If that's going to take a lot of time to set up, a lot of energy to set up, they're not going to be as interested in trying to create the project. And from us, what they're looking for is guidance on how to create a successful project and how to encourage people to participate in them so they can get to the research result that they want. So what we've decided to do is to build a pipeline to help enable the creation of citizen science projects. So we've partnered with the Zooniverse, which already has a user base of people who are interested in citizen science projects. We're building a pipeline that enables a researcher to go into the Rubin Science platform, select all of the data that is required in order to be able to answer the research question, and then send it directly to the Zooniverse. So we've eliminated the step of downloading your data and then re-uploading it, because in the realm of Rubin data, the scale at which we'll take data, that's just not something that people are going to be able to do. We're providing a Rubin template, so it's easy for people to create their projects and to have an interface that they know the public are going to be able to use. We're providing support in creating interesting and engaging projects. There are some things that people don't mind doing repeatedly, and there are some things that people might lose interest in, as well as using our communications channels to help market the project to get people to participate. And then finally, our last audience is the informal science centers, the content creators there, and what sort of content might they want. So I've combined this into one slide. So really what they want is just flexibility. They want high quality assets that they can use to create their own content that features Rubin science. And in general, they need to be able to meet the needs of a broad general audience, whoever is going to come to the Science Center. So what we're doing is we're providing 20 short planetarium videos that they can cut into whatever content they want to create, as well as creating our own series of YouTube videos that promote Rubin and explain its science and technologies. And we're also setting up a workflow to be able to create more content like this as we move into the future. So I just want to conclude by trying to summarize our whole approach to how we designed and built this program, which is that we wanted to combine the outcomes that we desired. So the program feeling accessible, to be centering Rubin data, to be able to reach a large audience, with the concerns, desires, and excitements that our audiences are bringing with them to our materials. So the desire to want to have fun, to feel wowed, to feel welcome and invited into this process. And so we're looking forward to completing construction of our program and sharing it with the astronomy community and the public. And I hope that what this did was demonstrate how thinking about your audience in addition to your own goals helps really craft better communication and activities and will help you have a more lasting impact moving forward. So thank you. Questions? I wanted to end. I realized I didn't show any pictures of the observatory. So if you haven't checked in on how construction is going, there's been a lot of advancements. And so definitely go to the gallery at lsst.org and check it out.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much for that talk. Do we have any questions? Let's see.
So I guess I should raise my hand first. that was a great talk and a great summary of what's going on. I have one question for you, Lauren. In recent years, astronomers in the community have become, especially those people teaching, have become much more focused on trying to include climate change, climate catastrophe, we might say, in their work. Do you anticipate a component in what you're doing that will help teachers, especially at the high school level, address some of these issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was aware of that. I guess I would say, so we have a formal educator on our team who she picked those original 6 topics, which were sort of, what were the 6 that we thought it would be easiest to teach to classroom concepts using Rubin data. And so we started with the ones that were easiest to define, but we're definitely interested in creating more content moving forward, and thinking about those synergies and really what are the topics that people are trying to teach in classrooms is a big focus. And so I don't think we've thought explicitly about climate change, but that doesn't mean that that's not something we want to do moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next, Ben.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for this talk. I have a question which is maybe a little mechanical, so to speak, but I was wondering about in things like the demonstrations. I mean, I think it's great that a lot of things run in the browser, because downloading extra software is just a great hurdle, and then making sure that software actually operates on different platforms is, usually it doesn't. But something that I've noticed is that, if you look around on the web, there are a lot of, say, kind of science demonstration, educational software sites built by some science center or some planetarium years ago. And it'll be like, here's a little flash animation of how such and such works. It's like, yes, and it's 2020 and Flash doesn't work anymore. So all of this stuff is essentially dead. And I was wondering if you have sort of, the observatory has sort of a kind of plan to make sure that this kind of stuff keeps operating.
Yeah, definitely. So we're aware of that. So at the moment, we've chosen technologies and to build the applications that are as modern as they can be, and that we've chosen things that we think will continue to be used at least in the 5-year future. So that's sort of the timeline that we're thinking about. And then after a few years, having to check back in and thinking, where are the technologies of the web going, and what parts of our program do we need to refresh? Since we are an entirely online program, we don't want changes in technology to mean the things that we've built don't work anymore. So that's definitely part of our long-term plan of the longevity of the program.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I assume that also having things work on a variety of, you mentioned mobile devices, and I assume that having things work on a variety of platforms is very important for.
Yeah. So we're thinking about mobile devices, tablets, computers, and also different browsers that people would be using on their computers. So.
Thanks.
Joan?
Hey, Lauren, thank you for that really wonderful talk.
Thanks,
Joan. I had sort of 2 kinds of questions. First one was about the citizen science part of the program, and whether there were any plans to do some practice demos of potential citizen science projects before the LSSD data is available. Maybe any interest in using some existing NOIRLab data for that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we definitely have in our plan to run 2 test projects, essentially, just to make sure that from the start, to essentially go through the entire pipeline to test it out for ourselves and make sure that it's working before we go fully live and let whoever use it who wants to use it. So we are still in the process of defining what those projects are. So I don't know if they'll explicitly use NOIRLab data, but we have been using different NOIRLab softwares in terms of getting a lot of the precursor data for these activities. So I personally have used Data Lab and Antares to find data for these investigations. So there is definitely a synergy there that I'm interested in exploring.
Yeah, cool. I think there are other people on staff who would be interested to chat with you about that if that's of interest. So just put that out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. My other question was about the public-facing outreach efforts. I don't know too much about that sort of thing, so I was just wondering how, as a professional, what kind of metrics do you use to determine whether the outreach has been successful, or how do you guide how to direct your efforts?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it depends on different parts of the program. And I think there's different levels at which you can ask that question. So for the website, for example, we can use Google Analytics to track how many new people are coming, how long are they spending on the page, what are they clicking on. That's a little bit different than asking a more meaningful question of, did you learn something from this experience? I do think that's harder to measure, and exactly how we're going to try and get that feedback, I don't know if we fully decided yet. But that's another way in which social media also comes in, because people very readily want to give you their feedback. And also just by looking at things of how many comments are people leaving? Are they liking things? Are they sharing things? And so trying to gauge just based off some of those performance metrics of what are people finding interesting, what kind of content are people responding to better, and moving more in that direction, and then leaving behind some of the things that maybe people aren't liking as much. But some of those deeper questions, it's easier to tell if you're like giving a talk to people when you see their faces, like, oh yes, okay, they got that, or no, I need to step back and like explain it again. And so I think it's just going to be a balancing act as we try and find the right metric to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we have Kevin.
This was a wonderful talk. That's a lot of really cool tools you're building, and I'm really excited. I think that Rubin Observatory is going to offer really a whole bunch to the public, and it's great that you're utilizing this opportunity. I have kind of a nebulous question that I'm going to ramble to try and get at, which is like, how are you folding in the idea of uncertainty around this, and how are you folding in the fact that, you know, like when data from the Rubin Observatory comes out, there's going to be multiple interpretations of this, and so you're going to want to watch out for favoring some interpretation versus another, because it might, you know, like, and I find that when I do outreach and teaching for students, it's hard because students sometimes come into astronomy thinking like, oh, there's a right answer, and we're working towards a right answer. And my goal is to show, no, science is this process, and you know, there are interpretations of the data that, you know, are favored and unfavored. But, you know, even when you're describing in some of the stuff, you're like, oh, here's distances to galaxies, and those distances are, you know, from some science that's been done, and they may not be 100% accurate, or they may be based on, and like, I'm wondering how you're going to approach this, or if maybe it isn't important, maybe depending on the audience you're reaching out to, that's not an important thing. But I find it's a thing that I care about a lot with outreaches myself, but, you know, maybe it's not as high on the priority list with the work you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That's something that I definitely struggle with a lot, as well as the astronomer on the team. And I think what I've sort of come to realize is that it sort of depends on who I'm talking to and in what context. So for something where it's maybe going to be a quick interaction, I'm maybe not going to go into all the details, and people just sort of want to know the point of like, this thing is far away. For the educational activities, for example, it can get tricky of, we don't want to take away from achieving the learning outcome by adding in all of these details. So maybe that's where in the teacher materials we'll offer that information of like, here's a complexity that you can offer as a discussion question with your students if you want. And so instead of baking it into the activity itself, it's now an option that people can add in. And then in terms of, I find those things personally really interesting too. And that could just be the focus of a whole article that we write for the website of like, and like, I could see a social media campaign of like two scientists, like, here are our perspectives, and now we're featuring both of them, and it can go back and forth. And then that's that engaging human interaction, right? Of, we disagree and we have opinions and we have thoughts, not just like the science has been done, like, I think is an interesting space to explore.
Yeah, I was heartened to hear that in your social media, you weren't trying to do this thing that I see a lot where you like give the Vera Rubin Observatory like a cute, like, I'm a sentient observatory, and you wanted to really highlight the like people that are doing this, because I think that's really, really important, so that we think of it not as this monolithic, like, this is where science happens, as opposed to these are where scientists who are of a variety of different backgrounds and bringing different things, where they come and discuss and do work. And that's really cool.
Yeah, most people have no idea like what a telescope is, like what this building that I'm showing a picture of, but like a person struggling with a problem, or a person like doing something technical, like that's a thing that they can relate to. And so that's really what we want to be focusing on. So.
Cool. So next we have Christine.
Thanks, Lauren. This was a great talk. I have a couple of questions. The first one hopefully is fast. For the Sky Viewer, I really like the idea of having these different tours, but I was curious if there's space for users to create their own tours, especially since, for instance, if someone wanted to do something from their own ancestral cultural knowledge or their own beliefs versus something that you could pre-do within the software based on your knowledge.
Yeah, so I think that's something we've been thinking about. So sort of two levels there. If someone had something like that in mind and contacted us, at least in the beginning, we could work with them to create that tour. But in the future, maybe moving into the idea of people being able to like favorite their own things and create their own content. But from a technical standpoint, we want to build out that core functionality first and then move into these additional, like being able to log in and create your own things. But I do think in the meantime, if someone had an idea and reached out and contacted us, there would still be a way to incorporate that content into the Sky Viewer for sure.
And then my second question is more towards the education materials, though I think it can also apply to the other ones. And it's again getting at this question of like evaluation and metrics, right? I mean, you showed us with the education how like students could click through this so quickly and like not really pay attention to what they're doing. Are you going to do any kind of evaluation to see how much time they spend, or do they interact with prompts? Any sort of correlation with their normal classroom day-to-day activities? I know that then gets into like IRB messes and maybe you can't collect all the data from the middle school and high school, but I'm curious if you've thought about that side of the evaluation.
Yeah, in terms of, so sort of twofold, we've definitely thought about how are people interacting with these things. We've done a lot of user testing for all of our materials where we've had people click through. We're trying to make sure that can they answer the questions? Are the tools working? What sort of big roadblocks are we seeing and removing those? In terms of actually analyzing how long are people spending on each page or interacting, I haven't thought about that, but it is also a website. So the same sorts of analytics that we could use for the normal website, we could also use for each of these investigations to get a sense of how long are people spending on each page, how much are they interacting with one of these widgets. And then we are thinking too about, are the students achieving the learning outcomes or not? So we have pre-assessments to try and understand what sort of knowledge are they coming into the activity with, and post-assessments to see what are they leaving, with. So I don't know if that entirely answered your question or not, but.
Would your assessments, sorry if I just throw in a maybe 2A, include anything about whether this has an impact on how they view scientists or what it means to do science or any of those items in addition to the learning objectives?
That's a good question. I am not certain. I could get back to you on that though.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Joan and Ben, I'm assuming you just haven't lowered your hand, or do you have other questions?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
fine.
sorry.
No, that's fine. So I think, are we all out of questions? Okay, well, in that case, then I'd like to say thank you to Lauren. That was really interesting and really great questions from people as well. I've got a lot to think about as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming to Flash Talk. We'll be back again next week, I think. So see you then.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.